Hi, I'm Derek Wheatley, and this is episode 9 of the Wheatley podcast. I hope I sounded a bit more interested than I did in the intro of last week's, because when I listened back to it, I sounded terrible for some reason. I'm doing this at, what time is it? It is 7:08 a.m. on Tuesday. Last week I got a bit tired towards the end, so I thought, while you're at your freshest in the morning, I'll get this recorded, and hopefully it'll sound a little bit more upbeat, and I won't be slurring my words as much as I was, because nobody needs to hear that. I'd like to thank people for tuning in on Saturday and to the live Facebook thing we did. It was a bit of crack. It's just like what I was watching, what I'm listening to, what I'm reading. People were kind of sending in little comments on the side, which were putting me off, but it was funny. And so it's something we're going to do it's something we're going to do every Saturday, but hopefully try and get the time consistent at 6:30 each week, just so people know that it's coming on. Hope everybody's doing all right in lockdown. It's tough going, I know that, and we hope to put out some content that you'll take something from and enjoy listening to, and maybe it'll just take you out of your homes for an hour to listen to somebody talk about different stuff. And today we've got some quite different stuff. Last week we had the questions, really enjoyed it. My brother's very close friend David Dollery sent me a question the day after the podcast. He's a family friend too, so I wanted to kind of give him his airtime, really, just because he asked really cool questions, and they're film questions, so I'm always going to answer those. If you have any more questions, actually, just keep sending them in. You can, like I said before, do it through Facebook, through Twitter or Instagram, or just message my Facebook page, John's Facebook page. You'll find them all. You'll find it on there, and just send your questions. Anything is, accepted. Well, not anything. Go easy. But you know what I mean. Anything above board is accepted. So, I another thing I really need to stop doing is writing on two notebooks. I've been doing this thing where I've got the kind of notebooks where I'm kind of keeping messy notes and unedited stuff, and then I've got the notebook where I pare it down and it's a lot neater and my writing is clearer. But because it's on the messy notebook, I take so many notes that I almost don't want to put them over to the other one, because it's too much. So I've got two on my lap here, so if there's a little bit of gaps here and there, it's just because I'm flicking between each notebook. So I'll start with Dollery asked me two questions. David asked me two questions. I'm going to put one in the end of the podcast, one in the front and one in the back of the podcasts, to bookend what I'm doing in between. So the first question he asked was, bad performances in otherwise great films, and who I would replace the offending actors with. Okay, so the first one is completely due to racism. And, I don't know whose fault it was. I suppose the writer, the person who cast him, maybe the director even, it's no excuse for thinking well, that was days gone past. It's nonsense. If anybody's seen it, it's Mickey Rooney's performance as Mr. Yunoshi in Breakfast at Tiffany's. It is racist, offensive. There's this ton of makeup they put on him to make him look, Japanese or Asian. It's absolutely stuffed with Asian stereotypes, and it's. I saw the film maybe about 10 years ago at this stage, and I had read the book, actually, the Truman Capote book, before it. And when I saw it, I didn't really know who it was, and I was just like, Jesus, that's racist. And I went, I checked, obviously, or saw at the end of the film, it was Mickey Rooney. And I was thinking, that is awful. So I would definitely replace him with a Japanese actor, first up. And so I thought of Japanese actors who would fit there was real classic Japanese actors in the 60s. 50s and 60s, and these were pushing boundaries as well. These Japanese directors were pushing boundaries all the time. They were crossing over into the States. So I would have Takeshi Shimura. He is amazing actor. He was in Seven Samurai, Rashomon, Ikuru, which is one of my favorite films of all time. He is range, presence, and he's adaptable because he's been in comedies, dramas, samurai films. That's what I'd replace it with. If I'm being honest, take out, if you're going to do an American adaptation and not have Japanese actors, take out the Japanese element. That'd be the end of it. Second is Quentin Tarantino in Pulp Fiction. You could have Quentin Tarantino in every film. Tarantino in Django Unchained, doing his Australian accent. Good God, it's awful. But particularly in Pulp Fiction, he's awkward. He's always awkward on screen because he's not an actor. His appearance takes you out of the flow of the film because it's Quentin Tarantino. Particularly if you're looking back on it now. Maybe not at the time, it was his second film, but when you look at it now, you see it's immediately, oh, that's Quentin Tarantino, and all of a sudden the flow has gone out of the film, and it's a good scene as well. So if you replaced him, I think, with someone like John Cusack, who in the late 80s, early 90s was a poster boy, he's adaptable and he's charismatic too, so he would have filled in that void a lot better. I think Tarantino shouldn't be in his own films. It's kind of I suppose it's a bit of arrogance on his part, I suppose, but he is kind of like that. But so that's Tarantino. Now, I know he's not a major role in this film, and here's another person who's not a major role in the film, but he just stood out so much for me. The latest adaptation of A Star Is Born, the Bradley Cooper one, I would definitely remove the dude Rafi Varon. He plays the manager who comes along, and he's so over the top in his villainry. He tries so hard, which kind of makes him come across as wooden, really. So he's doing the whole villain thing to an extreme, and I think the Hollywood industry has decided that Russians were always evil for them, so all of a sudden this British thing became something that kind of got hung up on an English thing. So it's kind of the British are the new Russians in villainry in Hollywood. So I would take him out. I put Taron Egerton in. I think he's a good actor. It'd be a change of pace for him because he does always play the good guy. At the moment, he's always playing the good guy. That's sticking with the English thing. So that's who I'd replace him with. And if you see A Star Is Born and Rafi Gavaron as the manager, it's just so over the top in its evilness as such that I'd replace him. I hope that was answered the question for you, Dave. And so like I said, I'll go next to at the end. I'll answer your follow-up question. So and this question, I wanted to talk about music on mood. So while we're stuck inside, I mentioned the other day, I think it was on the Saturday Live thing, that I was chatting to my dad about his listening habits over the last couple of weeks, with the coronavirus going on, and he was digging through his music, and he was talking about Kenny Rogers and Beethoven and Neil Diamond and just this huge eclectic range of stuff that he has, and he was listening back to it that maybe he wouldn't have listened to in a while. So something I was trying to do, and I wanted to read up a bit on music, on mood, because I'm hugely into music. So I have some stuff written down, and I hope it doesn't come across as too much ready. I'll try and keep it as flowy as I can. But I looked up this. I took a lot of this from Psychology Today. So obviously the brain produces chemicals when we listen to music, such as serotonin and dopamine. And obviously serotonin is a big thing for depression, because when we talk about antidepressants, we always hear about serotonin. So the link up is there. So music can produce these in the brain. So obviously we should be going to music to help us if we are in a low mood, and obviously some of us are at this stage. So when we're listening to relaxing or loud or angry music, the same things can happen. It can stir up a number of emotions in us, and not just trigger emotions in the sense of bringing us back to something, which I'll talk about in a bit. It's also just raw emotions that it brings up. And it can, like I said, it can be the same for middle of the road stuff right through to heavy metal, dance music, whatever you're into. It's all relevant in this case. So what I took down was 6 things that Psychology Today gave me. and I'll expand a little bit on them. The first thing they said was positive feelings. So obviously we're all looking for positive feelings all of the time, not just now. So like we broaden our mindset in ways that which is beneficial to our health, and creative thinking, which is another thing that creates positivity, leads on. So it's like a path to it. There was the startle effect, which is something I hadn't heard of, which is like the brainstem reflexes. I can't read. Oh yeah, hardened for quick and automatic response to sudden noise. So loud or distant music. Responses associated with surprise, laughter, and fear. Sound may make you jump in concert, and you will remember the startle effect. Anxiety disorder sufferers are obviously jumpier. Now, I started thinking of what it meant to, the loud noises in concert, and immediately my brain, for some reason, went to pyrotechnics, rather than music. That's just an effect within the concert. And I thought, you see outdoor, obviously, gigs, you'll see fireworks or, like I say, pyrotechnics and explosions and things like that, depending on who you've gone to see. But I also thought about, when you're standing quite close, and I remember this, I didn't feel it in my first outdoor concert, but my first indoor concert, like the bass, a loud bass, if the tone is quite deep. If you're in an indoor venue and you hear, you're close to the stage and it's rumbling bass and it comes through your body, you can feel it coming up through the soles of your feet. That must be an extension of the startle effect. Now, it's not startling, but it certainly is something that will bring you a physical sensation of the music, rather than just like an oral sensation, or aural, I should say, sorry. And that stands out for me, bass coming through. And obviously in different types of music, bass is different. In dance music, bass is kind of more prevalent, but then, in rock music, the tones are quite deep and low, especially the heavier metal you go. If you're into music, you'll understand if they drop tuned guitars, especially the low E string down to D or even C, it's just rumbled through you. And that for me is kind of almost an extension of the startle effect. Then the other one is being in sync. So like dancing and internal rhythms slow to become one, such as heart rate. So it can affect your heart rate. It slows down. Everything comes a flow. And I noticed that when I listen to slower music, it becomes circular almost. That it's this nice rhythmic flow within you and with the music, and it's a really nice thing. So being in sync with the music is pleasurable. So you can dance or tap your feet. And the same concept in music and films. So, everybody's seen a horror film. They use like startling music, this jumping effect, to get these jump scares out of you. They use a lot of strings. The famous being, the scene in Psycho, in the shower with the knife, or are these building strings, and something's coming, and it's like you'd wonder why they do that, but the reason they do that is to increase the tension. It's not like they're not trying to hide a scare. It's not a secret. They know that that the scare is on the way, but they're going to add to the tension by building it up to that. And the same goes for sad or romantic films. The strings will swell a lot more, but there'll be a lot of minor chords, so there's a sadness in the minor chords. So they'll use that to great effect to stir your emotions. And, it does work. It's something that's worked for, how many years, decades anyway. There's also the emotional contagion, which is another thing that was new on me. We catch others' emotions when we attend a concert, and our emotions share in part influenced by emotions of others present. It's, if everybody's at a concert, and I remember going to the last Radiohead concert, and everybody was just there to listen to the music. There was no messers, there was no, lads walking around with their tops off drinking cans. It was people were just there to listen to music, and there's an effect of a kind of a mass communal effect, I should say. I was going to say communion there. I don't think that's the correct word, but like a communal effect. That's actually really comforting especially for someone like me, it was comforting. And like that kind of emotional contagion is something like people might feel if they know me, and I'm in particularly anxious mood, we'll say. They will feel the anxiety coming from me and become anxious themselves, like a secondary kind of passing something on to someone. Not the correct phrase at this time, but you know what I mean when I say like you can feel anxious after talking to someone with anxiety. And that's definitely true, because I mean, I've experienced it, and I've probably made other people experience it. Another thing is musical surprise. So listeners experience strong emotions when something really unexpected happens, like a key change. I was watching a video on YouTube yesterday, and we all know about the key change in, we'll say, like Westlife were one of those bands that did, the groups I should say, that did always the key changed higher for the last chorus, and you knew it was coming. And it's kind of gimmicky a little bit if you're doing it all the time. Now if you do it every so often, it works very well, but the key change normally goes up. But what I was watching the video yesterday, it was talking about key changes going down. So they talked about Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody, it does it. In Eric Clapton's Layla, it does it. The Beatles' Penny Lane, it does it. And if you go back and listen to those songs now, it's really interesting to hear the key change, the key drop in a song rather than rise. And it kind of knocks you off a little bit when you know it's there. You're like, oh, because we're so used to it going up rather than down. It's really interesting if you go and listen to Penny Lane, for when it goes to the opening of the song into the first verse, you'll hear the key change, the key drop, I should say, and it's quite strange on the ears. So I thought that was really interesting. And so another thing on that was, like, rather than just a key change, there was changing time signatures, and a lot of bands do that, and it kind of has that, again, in its own way, a startle effect, where the time signature just shifts completely, and it takes you out. There's this, if you watch, oh god, I'm not going to remember the name of that film now, and I'm always talking about it. Oh, sorry, it's called You Were Never Really Here. It's a Joaquin Phoenix film, Lynn Ramsey director. Johnny Greenwood did the score. If you listen to the opening score, the main song of the score, I should say, if you tap your feet for the first 4 bars and keep tapping 4 in a bar, when it goes into the next part, it's actually 5/4 time signature, and your tapping goes completely off before coming back in on 4/4, and it's really jarring. It's a technical thing to do for musicians, actually, and it sounds deadly. And it's the same goes for a minor chord arriving instead of a major that you expect, because, like I said, minor chords are quite sad and plaintive, and when it arrives out of nowhere, all of a sudden it becomes it just changes your emotion, and it is a musical surprise. And then going back to emotional events, when the memory is evoked. So are the associated emotions with the memory. I think about music a lot, and I get taken places by certain songs, and we all do, and we get our senses. And sometimes I've listened to songs, and it's reminding me of sense of smell, of something that I smelled years ago when I heard the song, and that's it's when it does it to you, it's crazy feeling. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to list a few songs that brought me back to some places when I hear them. So I remember when I was quite young, and I don't know if I've told my mother this story. I was quite young, and my mother and father had separated at this point, but my mum used to come down on the weekends and stay down there, and then go back up to Dublin for where she was working. This was before we moved to Dublin, obviously, so we were staying with her dad. And there was I don't know if people remember, I'm sure they do. It's a song by the Bangles called Eternal Flame. I looked up who it was covered by. It was actually covered by Atomic Kitten back in the early 2000, I think. Now, I remember going up the corridor of the house, and I could see, my dad used to leave the radio on at night time. So, very low, but it was on. And obviously my mum had got up, and I'm sure she got her coffee, because she still does to this day. But, and she must have been, sitting there listening to the radio or whatever. But she always used to leave us a little note for me and my two brothers, and she'd put 20p in the bottom of the page. And listen, 20p was big in those days. Trust me, for little kids, I was about 7 or 8, I'd say at this stage. 20p was big. You could get a lot of stuff in the sweet shop. And I remember that just that particular day we went up, and I could see that she was upset when she was writing the note. And I could have, when you're young, I think seeing any parent getting upset when you're young is very startling, and you do not want to approach that parent. You don't know how to deal with those things. I probably still don't know how to deal with those things, if I'm being honest. But yeah, she was upset, and this song was playing, and I every time I hear that song now, it kills me, and I hate the song. And the worst thing about it, it's actually a good song, well written song. Can't listen to it. Every so often you hear it coming on somewhere, and it it makes me grimace, and it just brings me right back to that, and I really dislike it. I have the Verve Sonnet. Shout out to Sean Allen, Paul Allen, and John Lynch. I was in a band with them. Our very first gig, we were playing Sean's girlfriend at the time, Emma. We were playing their first gig, so we went. It was a fancy dress, so we went dressed as the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper era. So we were all done up in our flashy suits and our wigs and our glasses or whatever. Well, I had my glasses anyway, but and we had to get dropped off at the kind of a little bit off from the pub, and we had to run across in our Beatles gear, and that was probably the worst part. But I was very nervous. Obviously, I never played, and Sean was a kind of an old pro. We played Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band first, because why wouldn't we? And then it was me stepping up to sing Sonnet, and it was such it was so surreal being there dressed as a Beatle. All these people were dressed as all different characters. Just before the gig started, my brother and one of his friends came in, and then a couple of my friends came in, and they were kind of sitting in my kind of line of sight, I suppose. And I sang it, and it was brilliant. I loved it, but just leading up to it was so nervous. So every time I hear Sonnet, or I still play it quite a lot, it takes me right back to that. I have the Four Seasons by Vivaldi, Spring. I obviously like all four, but Spring in particular was a favourite of mine and my mother's. And when I was living in Dublin, she had this old stereo system. It was kind of one of those stacked ones that had the tuner, the tape deck, the CD, and then on the top she had the record player. And Vivaldi Spring was just it's an amazing piece, and you should go listen to it. It's very uplifting, actually, and the fact that it's spring now, it's good timing to go do it. So that reminds me of that. I should have known better by the Beatles. My dad, these are all happy memories, which is, it was nice to write these notes, because it did give me happy memories, apart from the Bangles song. So I was collecting the Beatles albums basically, and when I was saving up enough money, I'd go to a shop called Tape to Tape in Swords, and I'd buy the CD. I don't know if I had any kind of, I didn't think, well, I'll get Sgt. Pepper first and then Revolver, but I don't know if I had a system, but I got A Hard Day's Night, and I had it down in Athlone with me when I was down with my dad, and it was playing. And I just remember he was singing along, but I don't know why I should have known better. It could have been any of the songs, but this in particular, he was singing. So he started telling me about the parties he used to go to when he was, a young man. And at the time, obviously, the Beatles were huge, and his cool factor went up so much when he was just, to me, when he was singing all these songs. If I Fell, I Should Have Known Better, Hard Day's Night, all the songs on that album. It's actually a great album. So when I hear I Should Have Known Better, or some of the songs in A Hard Day's Night, it does bring me back to that, just my father singing them, and I'm going, oh wow. Being kind of naive in my youth, to think, oh, he likes the Beatles, they were the biggest band in the world. It just makes me sound, like I say, very naive. I'm not a big fan of the Manic Street Preachers, but A Design for Life is one of their big songs. I'm sure most of you know it. If you don't know the title, you'll definitely know the songs if you hear it. We used to spend, when we got past over 12, when we became teenagers, my brothers and I, we'd take turns like spending a week with my grandparents on our own in Dundalk, just having some time, together with them. And I remember I used to listen to the radio when I went to bed. I had a CD Walkman with me, and all my CDs, but I used to listen to the radio at night, and Design for Life was just everywhere at the time. I used to listen to it, and it was just, you felt I enjoyed that week, and that was just kind of a highlight of it. So it does bring me back to those glory days. And the last one, a kind of a sad one again, is Warning Signs by Coldplay. When I went to Florida with my girlfriend at the time, it was like 2001. No, it wasn't, 2002. And that album, their album, A Rush of Blood to the Head, had come out. And I bought it on the way over, I think. Or obviously I took it with me. And we used to listen to that a lot when we were sitting out on the decking, having a drink, or, if it was raining, we were in the apartment, my mum's apartment, and just chilling out. And I thought it was a great album. And, we came back, and a few months later, she broke up with me, and I was heartbroken, the usual first love heartbreak. And Warning Signs, it's like the thing I talked about before in one of the other podcasts. When we're sad and really low, we listen to the saddest music, and this was just the thing that really took me down, this song. And I still listen to it because I actually really like the song, but it doesn't bring out any kind of happiness in me, So yeah, they're the kind of, I wouldn't say the songs of my life, but certainly ones that evoke memories just through hearing them. Fusion Training Centre, Monksland Athlone. A place to train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, kickboxing, martial arts and CrossFit. A great atmosphere with experienced coaches and a real sense of community. If you want to join the team, find us on Facebook at Fusion Training Centre or drop in for a chat. Fusion Training Centre. Train like a warrior. Yeah, I'm really missing Fusion. Martin has set aside some time for CrossFit and different exercises for kickboxing and stuff, but it's very, very difficult for me. And I'm there has been a couple of days recently where I've been struggling quite a lot with my mood, and I know it would only be improved if I was in Fusion, but unfortunately it's obviously we can't do it at the moment. But hopefully, like, this will end soon and we'll get back to our usual lives. So I want to talk a bit about creativity and flow within that process. I would align creativity with CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy, as the mind goes down a different route. And I think, I'll talk a little bit about how I find creativity and what I'm doing now, but there's a lot of different ways and a different kind of, you can draw parallels between creativity and CBT and what the two things can kind of come together. So I suppose a few different things that I wrote down, these are my thoughts. Now, I didn't rob these off anyone or take them off, Psychology Today. We've gone off that. But like the one thing about CBT that I found was incredible was the idea of a different path. When I'm writing, like, my mind takes a different route away from my problems or some of the negative thoughts that I've been having. It takes me away from the anxiety and even the mental pain that I can be in at times. When I'm really down, it can be difficult to write. So instead, I'll pick up the guitar and maybe string a few chords together, try something nice, chord progression or something, hum a melody, or it doesn't have to be something that you're going to record and play to people. It can just be something that you sit with, work on, and remove yourself from or at least try to remove yourself from the bad mood you might be in, or the difficult times that you're having. You're running from your mood, I suppose, and with creativity you can do that. And I would ask anybody to give it a go, because it does actually work. Like, CBD it's kind of taught me how to take my mind down like an internal route that it's beneficial in pushing back against the mood, and the negative thoughts. And that's what creativity does for me. Now, I suppose I've been creative since I was maybe since I started playing the guitar, I suppose. I was never, big on art or drawing or painting, but definitely since I started playing the guitar, you can't help but just kind of mess around on a few chords. And my podcast buddy, John, the other day sent me, a chord progression that he had come up with. And I actually played it on Saturday on the live Facebook thing. You can go back and watch that, by the way. It's on the Wheatley page on Facebook. But it's just, it's interesting how you can find that in times where you've got nothing else to do. Now, I don't mean that, and I'm not flipping in that I understand people still are working. I understand people are working in very tough jobs. I understand that people have children they have to look after. But in those downtimes, and we all have them, like, instead of maybe sitting down and watching something that you're not really interested in, you're just watching TV because it's on, maybe, give something a go. I'm not like a master of this process. There's no point in me preaching at you and telling you I can do all this. I do fail at times, and obviously it brings me, the thought process, kind of beating myself up about it, and it crushes my spirit a little bit. But I think the most important thing is to steer your mind back to a good place. It's very difficult to do that. I understand that. But if your creativity isn't working, well, then you can go back to, whether it's, contacting your pals for some sort of support. If you find some solace in music or films or whatever it is, and you sit down and you take that guilt-free time to do those things, which I talked about last week, about some things can be guilt-free, especially now. But don't let the fact that you're not creative one day put you off not trying it the next day. It comes in spurts, and one day I couldn't write, the next day I'll write 2 chapters, and that's just the way it works. That's the way your mind works. And if the flow is there, that's another thing. Like the creative flow, I hear Blind Boy talking about it a lot. I listen to the Blind Boy podcast, and he talks about creative flow, and I never had a word on it until I heard him talking about it, and I knew exactly what he meant. Is that you're almost on there's this kind of unconscious shift to a different plane where things happening around you or outside of your mind aren't there anymore, and all of a sudden what you've been working on is just flows so smoothly, and you forget everything around you. You forget what you're going to have for lunch or what time you're going to have your dinner, and this doesn't come every day. It may not even come every week, but when it does come, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about in creative flow. And there's nothing like it. And if you want to talk about CBT, they can't even teach that in CBT, the idea of creative flow, because it's not something you can teach. It's something that if you sit down to be creative, only then can you understand what it is when you get into that. And everything just is gone, and it's like something in your mind flicks, and you've found this escape to somewhere entirely different. And it's so exciting, when you come out of it. It's like I'm not going to say is that no, will I say no? Well, yeah, like it's like if you take drugs. Now, I'm not saying I know everything about drugs either, but what I'm saying is it's the mind goes up to a place that you're not used to it being. So it's, like I say, a different plane. It's so refreshing, and you become something else for a little while, and that's a beautiful thing, because it's not the anxiety that's ruling you, or it's not the depression that's ruling you, or it's not like, it doesn't have to be a mental health thing. It's just the day-to-day grind is gone. You're in that flow, and there's nothing like it. Like, another thing is never to quit on creativity. It can be found in so many places, and like I said, mine happens to be writing and music, but it can be found in many places that I couldn't even tell you what they are, because there's so many to list down. I've seen people drawing, actually Mama's Drawing Room, if you go onto that on Instagram, Grace is the lady who does it. She trains with us in CrossFit. Her drawings are so different to look at. They're very much to do with mothers and babies, and they're really cool. So have a look at Mama's Drawing Room on Instagram, because maybe you'll get inspiration from that, because it's a separate type of art than you might be used to. The old stuffy stuff that we see on TV and that, 16th century, 17th century stuff. It's new, and people are creating new art all the time, and they're pushing outside the boxes. That's not the correct saying, you know what I mean. So I'm now finding creativity in coming up with ideas and for this podcast. And it's very, for me, it's very exciting to jump on a topic and then conjure up everything you remember from it, be it like mental trauma, therapy, and, this kind of continuous journey to recovery. That's creativity in itself. Because what happens to me when I talk about this kind of stuff, I acknowledge the mental health problems. I'm just talking about my own now, right? So I acknowledge them. I realize the journey that I've been on to become, even to get onto the podcast and talk about this stuff and be 100% comfortable talking about this stuff. But I also realized the journey it took in between, and the people who, my parents who guided me through it, and friends who I've had around me, and people who I've made friends with since all this went down, and the old friends who've reached out to me, to just check in on me, see how I was. I recognize all that, but I find creativity helps in kind of, I wouldn't say expunging stuff from your mind, but from certainly with mental trauma and the therapy that I was through, it definitely brings back some of the stuff that I needed to get through other days. So in therapy, when I think about CBT, I'm trying hard to think back to ways that Kevin, who I've spoken about before, he told me I should do this. This is how I deal with everyday life, what I do to push through things, and it's reminding me of those things without having to look through notes and go back through drawers. I know all the notes are in the drawers, but it's easier if you can just bring them back in your mind. So when I'm writing about all this stuff, there is a certain sense of there's creativity in it, because things are ever changing, including anxiety. So where I was when I was being seen by him, I'm in a different place now. But I know from all of the stuff he has told me and shown me that I can get through it again if I'm struggling, if you know what I mean. So this creativity has helped me along this path. Can you find creativity or inspiration during the lockdown? I believe you can. I believe there's so much out there when it comes to YouTube and people showing you how you can be creative with like different things that you have in your home. We're on lockdown, and the stores that aren't essential aren't open, but we have stuff in our own home. So I do think you can get creative online. You can make videos. We've all got cameras on our phones and on our iPads and on our laptops. You can write blogs about whatever you want to write about. There's always someone to read them. There always is. You can do vlogs, same thing as the videos, I suppose. Everybody has a story. That's another thing. So tell yours. Write about what you know. That's very important. Don't start writing about a small boy, 6-year-old boy's experience in South Sudan. It's not, I always said that to my mum, that when I read stories set in Africa, and I couldn't, it's very hard to connect with them. Unless it's a very human story that we can all, kind of connect with. Like, I can't understand what it's like to be a 6-year-old boy in South Sudan who is starving, because, I've never been there. I don't have the capacity to understand the pain that little boy has to go through. So I can't emote that. I can't write that on a page for other people to believe it, because it's, I'm a guy from Ireland, in my 30s. So write about what you know, about your story. You can bring people into the story. It's not just going to be about you, but make sure it's, especially when you're first first attempts at writing. Don't overcomplicate it, but give it a go. If there's an instrument in the house, pick it up, try and learn it, or relearn it if you have put it in the wardrobe years ago. Most people, it's amazing how many people have guitars in their houses and they don't use them, or little keyboards, and just pick it up and give it a go. Why not? Do no harm. You have time in your hands now. Drawing or painting, never been a skill of mine, as I said, but maybe you have it in you to create art. You don't have to be Michelangelo. It's not like the Sistine Chapel. We're not asking you to paint that. But look at the artists, right? Just if you don't know these two artists, right, go and look at some of the work. Rothko and Jackson Pollock. I nearly said Sidney Pollock, but he's a director. So Rothko and Pollock, two artists who, on first looking to the ignorant like myself, Rothko's just large chunks of colour together, and Pollock is just a dude who just threw paint at a canvas. But there's stuff in that, and if you read up about that, you kind of think, oh well, maybe he meant this and meant that. I understand that. So every art is it's worth exploring, I think. And your skill maybe to be something more like Pollock and Rothko. Like I say, it doesn't have to be these perfect paintings. Warhol is considered a genius, but his stuff is original. But was it Michelangelo level of painting? Of course not. But it was certainly original, and that's the point. Be original. Go out there and just try it. Another thing that I find that a lot of people were taking up recently, and maybe it was a while back now, I'm not too sure, but knitting. It's an activity you may have done before, but you didn't have the time to continue. Now I understand that you need to have the skill there, the wool and the knitting needles and all for that. So it may not be at the moment, may not be possible. But if you do have those things, again, do that. It's something. It takes your mind down a route. It's like CBT. If you are struggling, if you're having anxiety attacks and anxiety pretty much on a daily basis, like I am, in my chest and in my arms every night I go to bed, do something creative to try and escape from there. Like I said, so much things, and there's so many tutorials on YouTube now that you can go on to learn ways to be creative. So be creative with the materials you'll have on hand. If you are like, okay, if you do not have paint, we'll say, and you have kids who have crayons and markers, there you go. Pick them up. Start doodling, and you never know what'll happen, but it'll definitely take you on a different route. So the next thing I had written down, it's kind of, we've got a couple of things left, but the next thing I had written down was reaching out to people. So how many friends you have on Facebook compared to how many you would call a friend in real life, because a lot of people may have 1,000 friends, a lot of people may have 2,000 friends. So how many do you have that you would maybe call up or text on a regular basis, we'll say? So if you take that number, right, is there anyone on there that you wouldn't call a friend? I mean that in inverted commas, a friend, but you like posts by them, they like yours, you might have a lot of things in common with them that you find through their posting and stuff like that. Like, why are we not starting conversations with people like that? If you agree with one of their posts, or you find one of their posts interesting and you think you connect with this person, what stops us, I wonder, from just sending a message and going, oh, that's really cool, yeah, I was thinking about this the other day, or whatever you're going to say, because it's easy for us to remain in our own group, and we'll always fight. We're all afraid of social rejection, but at this time, the strange time, as I keep saying, where social rules, again, inverted commas, I have it, that we have all set up have gone out the window, because they have, we're not used to this kind of stuff. Maybe the people have thought of reaching out to you before, but you haven't stepped up because of those social rules. So I wonder why we don't step up, break the ice, because we're in lockdown, but it doesn't mean we can't make friends, talk more, and reach out to out through social media pages. Now, social media, that's the main word, is social. Because because we spend so much time on it, glued to it. But yeah, like, how social on it are we? Because we're just posting and reposting, and someone says, "Oh, that's really cool," and you reply to that. We're not actually that social on it. It's kind of more of a nosy thing. And I know I'm on it as well, like, so I'm not having to go with anybody, but it's kind of a nosy thing. Is there people on there that you think that you could get on with if you met them in real life as such, out in the street or in the pub or wherever you go? I think we need to think about that. As why aren't we reaching out to people who we might? I've reached out to a couple of people recently who maybe I wouldn't have before, but like I said, we're stuck in this kind of stuck in this like limbo. So like I see on those kind of websites, I see positivity in spurts, between the warnings, the guidelines of how to keep our social distance, but our phones and our tablets they remain close at all times, and we're a few words away from a conversation that might cheer us up or make people feel better or inspire someone, or even inspire ourselves. Just in case you're wondering, I did write some of this down because I'm never going to remember this stuff in my head. But it is, we have our phones all the time, and we're flicking through it a lot more. We're spending more screen time than probably you've ever done. You're glued to this kind of stuff, and like I say, you're a few words from connecting with somebody. And there's no reason for us to be in this lockdown and still not try to actually be social and to actually try to make friends and connections with people. It's good. Like you can share your creations with people on Instagram. I'm only on Instagram a short time now, but there is creativity there, and I see it. I see it every day. Share it with people who you think will appreciate it. If who's a musician or an artist or whatever they are, but share your creation. If you have things in common with that, find out what they think of it, because that's the feedback you're going to get. That's the stuff that we want, is feedback from people, and confirmation that what we're doing is worth our time. So share our short stories, and myself and Calvin, who's been on this podcast, are going to start sharing some of the stuff we write, and I'm really excited about that, because I'd love to read some of his work, see where his mind is at when he's creating like that, and I hope he feels the same way. Look, I can't call people on the phone. I'm really not comfortable with calling people. It raises the hair in the back of my neck, and that's not an exaggeration. I feel so awkward. I don't know what it is. I can't get past it, but I will eventually. But messages from people online or on my phone can help give me a little boost. And like I say, I've got some messages from people, like Linda in CrossFit, sent me a lovely message the other day, just out of the blue. And it was just something that gave me a little boost, because you kind of gives you some affirmation about what you're doing, about keep doing what you're doing, it's good, and you kind of go, well, Jesus, yeah, I will. So and it's not as if you're thinking to stop doing it, but there's those lovely little messages like that where people go out of their way. It makes people feel better, so why don't you make people feel better? Go and do it. Like I have got a few beautiful messages of support from people who listen, and I've taken something from myself, and myself and John are both proud that we're providing something positive at the moment. But on the flip side of that, Oli, we would have started a podcast right before a pandemic. Only we would have done that. But look, we're proud of it, because when we look back at it, we're going to have 2 episodes of me. We're going to have 4 guests, really good guests, and then we're going to have me, because I've done 1, 2, and then I've done 7, 8, 9. So this is the 5th episode on my own, and I'm getting through it. I'm writing stuff during the week, and I'm trying to think of really good subject matter that's important to mental health, but also interesting at the same time. Sharing stuff with John, hoping that we're doing something that'll work out and people enjoy listening to it. So basically, I'm saying, reach out, make friends, and when this is over, like, maybe your social circle will even have widened further, and that's very positive. All what I've just said, don't be a creep. That's one important thing. But yeah, reach out to people who you think you might have some stuff in common with. And who knows, like maybe there'll be a lasting friendship from it, and you can say, yeah, we're friends since 2010, 2020, when the coronavirus locked us down. You know, that's how cool is that? So we'll finish up with the sequels that Dollery sent me. I only had one rule on this. The Where's the question? I put it on a different notebook, of course. What sequels are as good or better than the original? What sequels are worse than the original? Okay, so like sequels can be, you know, the second film or the third film or the fourth film, but I stuck to the idea that it's just the second film, right? So we've had The Exorcist 2, The Heretic. Just watched it on Saturday for anybody who's Facebook friends with me. So they'll know this. Listen to the talent that was behind this. Director John Borman, 5 Oscar nominations. He has directed Point Blank and Deliverance. Actress Louise Fletcher, who won an Oscar for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest for playing Nurse Ratched. Richard Burton, 7 Oscar nominations. Max von Sydow, a titan of acting, 2 Oscar nominations. James Earl Jones, an Oscar nomination and an honorary Oscar. Even Linda Blair, the kid, has an Oscar nomination for the first film. How did they collectively make such a pile of shit? I apologise to my parents for my language. The synchronizer nonsense, you'll know what I'm talking about when you see the film. Laying heavily on the Africa connection. The stupid locust that flies around on screen. And most of all, Regan's psychic healing abilities and her telepathic powers, which I don't know where they were in the first film, but apparently she had them now in the second. It's lazy script. Do not watch this. It's absolute nonsense. Jaws the Revenge, pointless, dreadful special effects and shoddy editing. This is what happens when you take the original talent from a first film. You end up with this. Nobody was left from it. It shows. Blair Witch, Book of Shadows. I love the original. I went to see it in New York on my own. Didn't know anything about it. Went in and thought, Jesus, this is a documentary. Got freaked out. Went home, scared. Awful acting. Bad script. So many cliches from horrors in it, and it really is a film to kind of nod off to. It's awful. So they're the 3 bad. The best sequels, and the first 2 are kind of obvious, but they're obvious because it's quite hard to find a sequel that is not as good as the original. So we have, it's hard to find a sequel that's better than the original, I should say. I'm hoping I'm not getting tired. It's only 8:05. So Godfather 2, it's as good, if not better, than the original. I would probably put it better just for those prequel sequences with De Niro as Vito, where he's founding the Enterprise in old New York. I love that. And of course, it features the line, "I know it was you, Fredo. You broke my heart." That is one of the greatest lines in cinematic history. Without a doubt, it's an incredible film, Godfather 2. Terminator 2 Judgment Day. When we were kids, me and my brothers, I think we may have seen the first one once, maybe twice. It wasn't something that we watched all the time, but we watched Terminator 2 Judgment Day over and over again. It is better than the first one. There's a better storyline. When I saw this in my early teens, and you have to trust me on this, especially the younger people, the special effects were mind-blowing in this film. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I guarantee you they still hold up to this day. But in their day, they were incredible. That T-1000, like made of the liquid metal, the having the ability to make shapes and to take on the appearances of almost like anything he touches, that was just amazing. And the way the liquid metal just ran down the surfaces and stuff, it was crazy. And when the woman gets killed in her kitchen with he extends his hand into a kind of a spike and goes through her, I won't go too much further into this, but it's a great film, and it's a brilliant sequel, and a newer one, I think. I'm not saying it's better than the original, but I would say it's on a par, is Blade Runner 2049. Now, you'll have to forgive me, my memory, I've only seen it once, so I don't have a huge list of bits of storylines, but I put together kind of more, it's such a technical film, technically put together, we'll say. So, like, it's hard to make a good sequel 35 years after the original, right? Denis Villeneuve proves how good he is as a director by what he does with this film. He's making Dune at the moment. It's supposed to come out this year, and hopefully it still does. Dune is a dreadful film, but can he make it a good film? That's a real... If he does, that's a special talent. But if you go back and watch Denis Villeneuve's films, he's an incredible director. The special effects are like, they're bright, they're unique. The landscapes that they had to make, when you take the original of how neon lit and how wet and heavy rain all the time, to make what they did with this is incredible. And the colours, the script is great. Gosling's a really good choice as the lead, because he's a very stoic, quiet, Harrison Ford type presence actually. And when Harrison Ford is revealed in this, it's beautiful. It's a great scene in recent cinema. But the MVP, and everybody, when I was really into films when I was younger, not even so much younger, but maybe like in the late teens, people used to say this word cinematography. It was almost like an insult. Oh, was the cinematography great? It was they think you were pretentious because you knew what cinematography meant. It just that's not pretentious. That's actually just called knowledge. But Roger Deakins is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, cinematographer of all time. But what he does in Blade Runner is incredible. It's one of the most beautiful films to look at that I've seen. He won an Oscar for this. I think it was around his 14th or 15th time. Maybe I'm overselling there a bit, but he was definitely over 10 times nominated, and he had never won. And he won his second one just this year for 1917. Just watch his work in this. It's amazing. So I hope that answers your question, Dollery. Thanks very much for the questions, actually, and keep them coming, people. I really enjoy. They really take me to another place and take me out of myself. I want to shout out John, obviously, for all his hard work. My partner. I want to shout out his family. I want to shout out, and I forgot last week, and I'm ashamed of myself. I want to shout out to Megan, his partner. She is a great supporter of the podcast, and she's a lovely girl, and she's keeping John the straight and narrow, most importantly. So thank you, Megan. Thanks to Jer, my mother, my father, my grandfather, as always. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, please. We're picking up some subscribers here and there. We're picking up a lot of views there, and it's great. Facebook, the Wheatley, Instagram, Wheatley the Weekly, Twitter, Wheatley_the. We're not on Podbean anymore because they want money from us, and we don't have money to pay them. And we've got so many podcast platforms, we don't need to be on it. But it's a pity because it's a good platform, and we did have some listeners on it. We are still on, and we will remain on Spotify, Apple, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, and Google Podcasts. I want to thank every one of you for supporting us, for those lovely messages, for subscribing, liking, all of those things, for keeping up to date with us. It makes it all worthwhile. I'm off to drink some tea, and I don't know. It's my day off now. So the world is my oyster, as they say. Listen, I know we're in a difficult time. Keep the spirits up. We'll keep doing what we're doing, and hopefully you'll keep listening. Thank you so much. Take care of yourselves. Bye.